1. Wake up. You are listening at FameTV.info. Where am I? Male Kale said as he sleeps in his bed. In his previous life, he is a trained killer of the police, trained to assassinate high-profile criminals and big syndicates. After destroying all syndicates, he then retired and will make a family with his girlfriend Jane. They are happily wed and on their honeymoon. They slept, but then he realized that he can't move after several minutes. He was killed in his sleep by his own wife. Wake up, darling, a sweet kind voice permeated his ear, and then Male opened his eyes. He saw two people that was holding his little hands in a very kind way. Maybe it is mother and father, Male said as he slept again, that he was a boy born from the family of Urza Kale and Lord Melvin Kale. They lived in the manor of Golden Valley. They have land given by the king in a mansion, vast lands, an estate, and a town to rule. The world he lived in was the world of Lumia, inhabited by variety of creatures such as vicious monsters, humans, demi-humans, and beast-mans. Mama. Papa, Male shouted to them when he is 1 year old. My child can talk, Melvin said to Urza. He is a genius, Urza said to him. Time passed by, he was now already a 4-year-old boy by this world's time. He was taught by his mother Urza to read and write, and well, he was a fast learner when he was still a trainee assassin. Well, of course, he learned to read and write in a terrifyingly fast degree. With all that concluded at the age of 5, he was reading books about history, and random stuff like heroic stories of olds, monsters, bibliography, kingdoms and races, and as well as the prophecy books. With all he learned, he is still running out of books to read. Male approached his mom that was still sewing his dress. He grabbed the tip of her skirt and then pouted. Mom, I'm running out of books to read. I'm gonna die of boredom with this, he said. What? Did you finish them all? She said, while shocked. Okay, there were still books that you have to read. Let's go to the library, she said to him. Male and Urza walked to the library located beneath their house. It was a mini library that had a bookshelf. There's a secret mechanism to open the underground library. Urza illuminated the room using the lights of lanterns. The books were filed on the bookshelves, and there were many books that he haven't read yet. She grabbed the books one by one and she piled them on her son's hands. The herbalist book, oh here. Survival book. This one's important. Basic magic, basic enchanting, and this one's advanced. Alchemist book, crafting, job. Classes of different races and their specialties, she said. Then Male walked like a drunk, trying to balance all the books piled on his arms. After reading the kingdoms and races, as well as their job classes and specialties, he discovered everything about them. There were 3 factions of Lumians. First were the humans, which had 3 kingdoms. Pharmas, the barbarian empire of barbarians, Dwight, the royal kingdom of royals, and Skuld, the death kingdom of necromancers and witches. Second were the demi-humans. The kingdom of elves, Riverdale, dwarf kingdom Dwarven, and hobbit kingdom Clockwork. Last were the beast-man faction. The Lycans called Fawn kingdom, the vampires called Blood kingdom, and druids called the Grizzly kingdom. Humans had 3 kingdoms, and the barbarians were the pinnacle of humanity's warriors. They were known to be taller than most humans and had a body build of bulging muscles. Their class were barbarians, and they were specialized on all melee weapons. The Dwights were the ones who have many job classes that was collected from many lineages and families. But they were inferior when it comes to resilience compared to barbarians. The Skulds were the united forces of witches and necromancers. They were once divided. But after the king of necromancers and the queen of witches had an affair, they wed. Thus, united their forces and established a kingdom. Next, were the demi-humans. First were the dwarves. They were the masters of crafts when it comes to blacksmithing weapons and armors. They were the most armed when it comes to their army. Second, were the elves. They have 3 clans, specifically the High Elves, whom were magicians, the Night Elves, which were rouges, and the Wood Elves, whom were rangers. Lastly, the hobbits, whom were called the mechanics due to their inventions of automatons that were powered by mana crystal. They had an army of automatons as well as battle suits that they were equipping when they go to battle. The last faction were the beast.men. The first one is the vampires, called blood warriors, and the other was of the ancient clans of beast.men that can transform to bat.like beast named as Dracula's. Next, were the lycans, transforming to werewolves and possessing the ability to summon wolves that would attack for them. Last were the druids. They had druid shamans and warriors that can transform to werbears. His mother even gave him books about job classes tutored in the Academy of the Dwight Kingdom and their army. As you can see, in the job classes, the role of the combatant person that was used specifically for combat. For instance, the swordsman, ranger, knight, paladin, warrior, rogue, mage, priest, and fighter. He found out that he was capable of mastering it all, but the problem is the time to master it all. These kinds of job classes were only taught in the academy, and the only things you can learn outside the academy were techniques. Yes. It was not a job class dependent, but a matter of physical combat using only techniques of fighting. Weapon techniques and unarmed techniques. It was not skill based, because skills consumes mana and it is only a basic attack only using physical strength. Well, it was the time to ask for his father about his newfound info about techniques. Gathering info was a success that he approached his father and asked him kindly. As a previous assassin of criminals, it was important to know the info first before making the plan to attack. He learned it through his mistakes. He was making his greatest act, and that is to make a dramatic scene for his plan to work. Because acting was one of his skills from his previous life. "Dad, may I ask you something?" he inquired as he approached him. "And what is it?" his father replied. "About this book called Combat Techniques that you wrote. Would you be pleased if your son was excited to learn your own fighting style?" he asked his father. "No, son. It's still too early for you to learn it. I mean, you're still 5 years old. You still need to read lots of books as you can. Then when you're 6, well, we can start with swords, then spear and so forth. But for the meantime, just read well." "Okay," he explained to him. "If my age was the problem, well, I can manage myself to dodge a bullet if forced to in my previous life. That's not it. The problem was my body," he said in his own self. "Are you certain that your skills were really strong? Or you're just ashamed to show off of your skills to me?" he said as he handed the book to him, winked his left eye to him. His father was moved and his pride is touched by an ignorant child. So he showed his techniques to him. His father lined up all the equipment that will be used, like making a drill. First, he demonstrated his swordsmanship. With all his focus, he slashed a combo of left and right diagonal slash, then turned and slashed in a wide arch. That is called a sword technique, a technique on handling a sword on engaging combat. Male clapped his hands, but he had a thought in his mind that he will be a good sparring partner. "Next," Male said. Next was the spear technique. The father swung his spear, turned and thrusts it to the air. Then he pointed his spear making a clockwise motion, rapidly thrusts by 5 times. Male clapped then said, "Next," then his father showed him the bow and crossbow technique. He loaded 3 arrows to the bow and fired it all to the target points. Reloading it with 3 arrows in his hands, he fired it one after another, hitting all the marks. He then grabbed the crossbow, reloaded it instantaneously, rolled over and fired it to the mark. Then after, he dashed sideways as he released the bolt from the crossbow. He reloaded it again, then dashed backwards. He did a backflip, while releasing it in mid-air. All marks were hit. With no dull moment, he reloaded and fired it towards the 200 meters distance target, hitting near the middle of the bullseye. Male is impressed then said, "Next." The next one was dagger technique. His father slashed furiously all over the dummy. He made some distance, then eventually throws it to its head. He grabbed it, then he twisted the dagger sideways as he draws the dagger that ripped its face. He distanced himself, then he dashed and thrust the dagger on its belly. Then drawing the dagger from the belly in a gut-ripping manner, Male said, "Bravo," while clapping his hands. Next is two-handed techniques. His father lifted two-handed hammers and slammed it vertically to the dummy, and all the dirt is flown over, then slammed it to the other dummy sideways, then it is flown through the distance, only leaving barely recognizable dummy afterward. Next, said Male, lastly, it was the unarmed techniques. He began striking the hands of the dummy with rotating hands. Suddenly, he was striking faster and defending at the same time. Then, for the final act, he made a 1-inch punch that made the dummy blown by the force. "That's all. Aren't you impressed?" his father said as he is covered in sweat. "Well, it caught my attention and I've stored it well on my memory. Might also learn it as fast as possible," he said while taking the book from his father and left afterwards. His father let out a sigh as he watched all the mess on their training grounds. Disappointed for not even thanking him. Meanwhile, Male discovered the so-called techniques. He also discovered the leveling up of character stats by using a window card, and your job class is leveling also. Your performance can be enhanced by the stat points that you will receive when leveling up after killing monsters. The character stats were based on strength, dexterity, vitality, and focus. All had the so-called character sheet and the job class sheet. His mother and father have all of those. Specifically, they have a job class. But they didn't tell him which is which. These needs further investigation. But he was still a 5-year-old kid that has limited knowledge and understanding of this world. Besides, what was the reason he was reincarnated here? He wondered. Listen to the full novel at FameTV.info, direct link in the description.